Investing 101 says to buy low and sell high. And last week, Jeff Bell and I talked about players that we were trying to buy low on. Well, today we're talking about players that we want to sell high on before the market comes crashing back down. Jeff, did I simplify that a little bit too much? Buy low, sell high, but that's kind of what you want to do in Dynasty, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Too Big to Fail, The Big Short, whatever we're talking about here, the housing crisis, whatever it might be, but really we're talking about dynasty values. For the most part, dynasty values that are propped up and have the potential to crash out. And so I think that's probably a good way to take it.
So let's go ahead and start off. Last week we did do one position each. Full disclosure, and maybe a spoiler for people that are going to be watching through the end. The tight end market seems kind of sharp right now. So we've only got one tight end, but we made up for it with an extra at another position. But we're going to start with quarterbacks here. Jeff, who's a quarterback right now that you think you should be selling in Dynasty?
I've got Jordan Love as a sell in Dynasty right now. And then primarily right now in Keep Trade Cut, he's sitting at quarterback 12. And I don't know that anybody is feeling great with Jordan Love as their quarterback one or their quarterback one in a super flex format. And by quarterback 12 valuation, that's what it's telling you, that he is right there. I wanted to have players that are right behind him ready to go because that would have been a good thing to do. And I will do that right now.
Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, Travis Hunter, J.J.
Well,
McCarthy,
I think just quarterbacks
McMillan,
though. Yeah.
Brock Purdy.
Yeah. J.J. McCarthy, Brock Purdy,
Like
Kyler
Brock Purdy
Murray.
behind Jordan Love is crazy to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and Baker Mayfield behind Jordan Love. We saw what Baker Mayfield did last year, and when you're looking at a dynasty lens, the age difference isn't that big between Baker Mayfield being 30 years old and Jordan Love in his age 27 season. You're talking about 3 years for a 30-year-old quarterback. That's well within their prime production window, and I just think there are multiple players, multiple paths. To me, it's the type of thing that at some point this season we're all going to wake up, and if Jordan Love, maybe it was all the injury last year. I've seen some talk kind of come out of Packers beat about the reason why they scaled back from the passing game and changed the way that they were functioning. That offense was because of that injury. They were just covering him up. But at the same time, we saw a dramatic shift and away from the passing game, away from Jordan Love using his legs at all. In maybe the Eagles covered that up a little bit because the Eagles had a similar shift, but the Packers did the same thing the Eagles did, and they transitioned to the run game. That kind of happened across the league for some other teams as well. So Jordan Love had that great season in 2023 that placed him up here. But now you're talking about a player that needs to follow it up, needs to bounce back from that at 27 years old with multiple young players behind him who can catapult ahead of him. I really question about, one, this ranking. Are you able to even capitalize to Jordan Love? Do you think that you can trade Jordan Love and get something on top of it to move to J.J. McCarthy, to Brock Purdy, to Kyler Murray, to Baker Mayfield even? I don't think so. And so that's where this valuation, I just think it's wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there is a lot of questions here. And even Jordan Love, we talk about that. You said that great 2023 season. Even that, we talk so often about how much weight people put in the early season, and early on that season, we hadn't seen Jordan Love play yet. Everybody was saying Aaron Rodgers is gone, Green Bay Packers are toast, and Jordan Love came out and he looked great for that first month. But over the next 2 months, there wasn't really anything special there. I was looking from the midway point of the season. Like if you just take away those first 4 weeks, he was the per game QB 14, which sure, pretty good. But what people remember is when he took everybody surprised the first month of the season. So I think that, that QB 14 is kind of what his medium range of outcomes would be. He's a high-end QB2, which is great, but he's being valued higher than that right now. So I think all those guys that you mentioned, Kyler Murray, I have him ahead. Brock Purdy, I have him ahead. J.J. McCarthy, I have him ahead. I don't know. I mean, clearly, if that's what the market's saying right now and Keep Trade Cut, it's worth going out there and trying to make that happen. I think you and I might be in our little bubble right here where our rankings are very much so aligned. We're a little bit higher on those guys and lower on Jordan Love, but clearly the average consumer out here, the guys that are voting on Keep Trade Cut, do like Jordan Love a bit more than that. And we did see that. He wasn't a guy that I was aggressively drafting, but we would see him going, round 3, early round 4 in these super flex startups that we were doing. And that's typically where I'm looking at young wide receivers, young tight ends, maybe, I usually have 1 or 2 quarterbacks at that point. Jordan Love just wasn't really a guy that was on my radar in these startups at that cost.
Yeah, and really to stack it up, I mean, he could be outside of the top 20 in quarterback value very, very easily if he has a season like he did last, if he has a half season like he did last year. And one of the things Matt Waldman is makes a really good point about young quarterbacks that basically, I forget, I think it's maybe said like 15 games or so, but first 10 to 15 games, the league is just playing you very vanilla, and they're just trying to figure out
Hmm.
what you have. And then once they've done that, they've got the film and it's locked in there. Now they're attacking you, and you need to figure out how to counterpunch off of that. And I think that we last year really was that window for Love. And you talk about the way he started strong in his first season as the Packers quarterback. Yeah, it showed him having that potential to move there and to be that franchise level quarterback. But once the league caught on, adjusted, he hasn't been able to throw that counterpunch.
Yeah, and we've also seen a very different Packers offense last year. You know, they made big investments into their defense the last couple of years through the draft. They added Josh Jacobs, so now they have a better run game. They have a better defense. They've taken the air out of the ball a little bit. We could see that pendulum swing a little bit in the opposite direction now with the emergence of Tucker Kraft and the draft day investment in Matthew Golden. But either way, yeah, I'm kind of looking at Love as a high end to middling QB2, and the market values him quite a bit more than that. Now, Jeff, the next guy that I'm going to talk about here is going to surprise a lot of people, but I opened up the show talking about selling high. And right now, Josh Allen is being drafted as the overall QB1. And we talked about this on our show. We both have Jaden Daniels as the QB1. I prefer Lamar Jackson ahead of Josh Allen as well. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Josh Allen isn't going to be in the running to be the overall QB1 this year, but he's heading into age 29. And we do start to see the rushing will start to slip as quarterbacks get up there in age a little bit. And of course, Josh Allen could just be an outlier. You know, he could do what Tom Brady did and give you QB1 seasons into his mid 40s. But a lot of his production does come as a rusher. And as he gets older and that starts to wane, we could see that start to slip a little bit. So I'm not trying to sound the alarms by any means and say that like Josh Allen is a must sell player, regardless of what the thumbnail on this YouTube channel is going to say. What I'm saying is that Josh Allen right now is getting very, very steamed up. He's the most valuable player in all of Dynasty right now. And I don't know, Jeff. Again, this might be the same thing where we're kind of talking like maybe we're stuck in our bubble right now. But if the market prefers Josh Allen to Jaden Daniels, I mean, I wouldn't need anything on top of that. Like I would just trade Josh Allen for Jaden Daniels straight up. But if you can get even like a third round pick or a throw in injury away running back or something like that, I think it makes sense to try to do that now where you can just get younger at the position, get a guy who could potentially grow in value rather than Josh Allen, who we'd expect over the next year or two probably starts to move down just a little bit in those rankings.
And Josh Allen has just made tremendous growth as a quarterback overall. I mean, we all remember when he was a rookie and like you just never knew what was going to happen, or that playoff game against the Texans when he's just chucking a lateral. And now I know
Yep.
there was one moment, I think it was this past season, where he had a play somewhat like that and he just ate it instead. And then immediately after the game, they asked him like, were you thinking about and he's like, oh yeah, I was thinking about doing it, but like, he's kind of legislated that out of it. And to me
He
it,
was like wrapped up and you could see he was like almost trying to think about like
yeah,
lateraling the ball and then decided to tuck it and go down. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
yes. And it reminds me of LeBron James, when LeBron James was just like, if you've if you're as old as me, I'm the same age as LeBron James. So I was very aware watching LeBron James when he made his debut into the NBA, and he was just a physical freak, phenom, and highly, highly skilled at that. But like the athleticism was just off the charts. And then he just got to the point where, like, about the same age as Josh Allen is now, where it was a lot more cerebral when he was playing. He's picking his where to attack, those types of things. And I think that Josh Allen is playing that level of quarterback. And I go there because I'm genuinely curious if that lowers his fantasy ceiling to the point where he's
Mhm.
not this elite scorer. He wasn't, I mean, Lamar Jackson scored 3 more points per game than him last year. And so is he no longer the actual number one in fantasy points type of a quarterback? And Gene Daniels definitely has the skill set to be able to pass him in points per game even this year. And I think that you can, if he's going to play a little bit more conservatively, it's kind of some questions about the way the Bills offense operates in general, because they don't have the high passing volumes that they did when Brian Dable was there at first. They're just making transitions, just like we talked about the Packers, talked about the Eagles. The way that offenses are attacking defenses now, the Bills are another one that they're leaning a little bit more in the run game. They have a little bit more talent in the run game, and Josh Allen is not making the crazy mistakes and or the crazy big plays. And he's just kind of picking. It's like the Tom Brady picking you apart little bit by little bit, a little bit more in his game now.
You know, it's funny. I was just on with our friend Chris Harris yesterday, and we recorded a show, and we were talking about Josh Allen, and we were talking about, the wide receiver to target in this offense. And I said, I don't know if there is one because Josh Allen is at this point, and I made the Tom Brady comparison, and Chris laughed, and he said, I just wrote about Josh Allen being in his late career Tom Brady phase in the Almanac because he is at that point. He doesn't need a prime Stephon Diggs anymore. He is a facilitator. And I think that's like a perfect, you talk about LeBron James, and that's what I see. Like early career, Josh Allen was just throwing tomahawk dunks through traffic from the free throw line. And then as he gets a little bit older, he becomes more of a facilitator. He starts raising the talent around him. And he's doing that now. He's a much better football player now than he was 5 or 6 years ago. But the fantasy production could start to wane a little bit. And anytime I see a guy who, getting near 30 years old, being valued as the most expensive guy in Dynasty, I just see an opportunity to move off there. Again, not saying that Josh Allen is bad or anything like that. We're talking about values here. And I think that if you can move to a Jamar Chase or a Jaden Daniels or a Lamar Jackson and get extra on top, that's a move that you want to make right now in Dynasty. All right, Jeff, we talked about Jordan Love. We talked about Josh Allen. Let's talk about some running backs, some guys that we're always trying to sell. But what is it?
I just want to real quick. I'm still seeing. I
Yeah.
literally just saw today a tweet from a Ravens fan account that it was talking about how many arm punts is Josh Allen going to have this year? Over under 10.5. Josh Allen threw 6 picks last year, and I still remember
Uh-huh.
2 years ago during he had a couple of the primetime meltdown. There was that game against Denver where he had like 4 or 5 interceptions on. It was a Monday night, I believe it was. Maybe it was a Thursday night. But the conversation during that was basically comparing him to Jameis Winston and the way that he
I
has played
remember.
like 6 interceptions last year. I don't think that people have caught up. Even him being the MVP, I don't think people have caught up to that. And so that's where you're exactly right on the fantasy value lagging behind with it.
Let's talk about some running backs, Jeff. Who's on your list?
Yeah, Jaylen Warren is on my list, and I'm going with Jaylen Warren. And I know you are ready to push back on me, but really, when I look at Jaylen Warren, where he's sitting in Dynasty, he is entering his age 27 season. He's not anywhere close to 1,000-yard back in his career, and he's sitting in front of. It's like Tank Bigsby's 23-year-old. Braylon Allen's 21. Jalen Wright is 22. Jaden Blue, Ray Davis, Dylan Sampson's 20 years old. All these guys are directly behind Jaylen Warren. And unless we just have never, for all the efficiency and everything that everybody wants to point to Jaylen Warren on being an incredibly efficient back, all these different things, to me, it's a lot of expectations, and Jaylen Warren had no expectations. And so, like, it's found money basically at this point with Jaylen Warren. And so you're just happy to have the found money, especially in Dynasty, where he wasn't even drafted in the NFL draft, wasn't drafted in your Dynasty draft. You picked him up for nothing a couple summers ago because he was generating a little bit of buzz. We just haven't seen him deliver on that at any point. And so, being in an age 27 season, never really giving you, do you feel good to put Jaylen Warren into your lineup? And for me, to be a 27-year-old running back, I want to feel pretty good if I'm putting you into my RB2 spot right now. I don't think we're there on Jaylen Warren. I mean, situation could be best of his career this year. But again, I think there are a lot of young backs right behind him that are going to be primed to jump him in value very, very quickly.
Yeah, I feel good putting Jaylen Warren in my lineup when it's week 8 and I've got 3 guys on bye and a guy on IR and 2 other guys who are questionable and I need a flex play. That's when you feel good about Jaylen Warren. And I will say, like, initially, when you sent me the list of players, I said, it's Jaylen Warren. Like, he's so undervalued. Like, how can you even think about him as a sell? But then I looked on Keep Trade Cut, and right now he's being equal to a second round pick. And that's crazy to me. Like, I would have thought when I saw Jaylen Warren, I was like, you know what, you're getting like a third round pick for this guy is at best. But when I did compare him to the market value, yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you that he is a sell. And we see this all the time. These guys who great efficiency when they're coming in on 3rd and long, seeing light boxes, not really getting the workload that we expect. And Jaylen Warren, a very undersized guy who can do some fun things in open space. But if you put him in Najee Harris's role, what he's gotten over the last couple of years, that efficiency that we love, he's probably generating 2.1 yards per carry, and he's not breaking the tackles when he's getting wrapped up by defensive ends in the backfield. So just a very different type of runner. And maybe I'm big bringing this a little bit too much. It's the off season, and we're thinking best case scenario for every single rookie. But Caleb Johnson has been garnering a lot of buzz, and one of the things Mike Tomlin has said about him is that, when you watch him at Iowa, he's one of those players that just gets better and better the more volume that you give him. And then Arthur Smith starts talking about how they want to get him to 300 touches this year. And he's a guy who has some juice that Najee Harris didn't have. So you almost wonder, too, if a lot of people see Najee Harris out of the picture and they say, well, Jaylen Warren's the guy. Theoretically, it's not that crazy to think that he has tougher backfield competition this year than he has at any point in his career.
Yeah, and I think that what changed recently with the Steelers adding Jonnu Smith in there. And I think that there was definitely a
Yep.
window when you looked at the pass catchers, and it was hard not to project Jaylen Warren to be a top 3 pass catcher, top 3 target earner on this team. Now, Jonnu Smith comes in there, and where is the area that Jonnu Smith functions best? The area that you want to use Jaylen Warren in. Some of those those screen type plays to a tight end, or underneath the check downs, the dump off type plays like that. That's where Jonnu Smith, I would rather in the open field with a head of steam get the ball to Jonnu Smith than Jaylen Warren,
Yeah.
and have a defensive back worry about Jonnu Smith versus worrying about Jaylen Warren. That's me. That's the way I view it. And so I think that there was definitely a window where Caleb Johnson taking some time to figure out the passing game element of it, Aaron Rodgers coming in, not going to be scrambling around, having some checkdowns. And I feel like Jonnu Smith's arrival eats some of that off of Jaylen Warren. And I think there is definitely potential here where Caleb Johnson is very, very good and becomes a 3-down back. And Jaylen Warren is going to be a free agent. They could easily say, hey, this is Caleb Johnson's backfield. We're not going to pay Jaylen Warren, good luck getting something out there on the open market. And I think that that's in play as well.
And I think there was something where a lot of people wanted to just anoint Jaylen Warren as like the next coming of Austin Eckler, very similar play styles, an undersized guy. But the reality is he just hasn't emerged into that guy. And I think that people are still holding on to these efficiency metrics from years ago. And I'm with you. Like I said, I can't really push back too hard. I wanted to when I saw the name, but then I saw where he's being valued and that you can get a 2nd-round pick for him. And I'm not going to push back at all. I mean, that's as simple as like, if I've got Jaylen Warren in my league, I might just send out 11 offers to every single person in my league, seeing if I can get a 2nd-round pick in return and hope that somebody bites on that. All right, Jeff, sticking with the running backs here. Bucky Irving, and this probably isn't a surprise to many people. I have a very strict rule that I follow in Dynasty that if a day 3 running back ends up getting valued as a 1st-round pick or higher, I'm selling them. And that's where Bucky Irving is right now. And, blistering efficiency last year. It's impossible to ignore how good he was. But still, despite that, I think people think that, Bucky Irving is now going to be the workhorse in Tampa Bay. Even if you look at the time that Bucky Irving had his big breakout game through the end of the season, Rachaad White was still averaging 10.6 rushing attempts and 3.3 targets per game during that stretch. And we could see that change a little bit now with Liam Cohen out of the picture, but Grizzard was promoted from within. I'd expect similar offensive philosophy and play calling, added target competition now with the Mecca Ibuka there as well. I like Bucky Irving a lot, but seeing him right now as the RB7 is just way too steep for me. And when I look at where he is being valued alongside guys like Garrett Wilson is ranked below Bucky Irving right now. That is a no-brainer for me. Like if I'm in a startup, I'm not even thinking about Bucky Irving until 2 rounds after I'm taking Garrett Wilson, but the market really likes him right now. And I think a lot of that, we love Sleeper, our friends over at Sleeper, but they have memeified Bucky Irving this year, just, all of these memes about how great he is and how much they love him and how he's into this untouchable asset. And I worry that may have started to creep into his valuation a little bit because I just can't get behind an RB7 price tag.
Well, and I think the narrative is a little bit incorrect about what happened last year with the Buccaneers, because I think the narrative that I have seen is basically Bucky Irving took this backfield over. He benched Rachaad White. He is dominant and he has taken over this backfield. Rachaad White was very, very injured towards the end of last year. He was very hurt and he was toughing it out. And I think that was a kind of a motivating thing for the team around it. But, and then I remember there was that really bad fumble on, I think it was the Sunday night game against Dallas in a key game, like week 15, I want to say it was. And I think it was kind of the point of like, we know you're toughing this out and we want to have that acknowledgement, have you in there. But now you had this fumble and we're going to give the ball to Bucky for this window now because you're hurt, not because it's anything that it says about you. And I think that it's really being undersold that Rachaad White is going to still be very, very involved. And I think that Sean Tucker is going to be involved as well. And when you have the potential, I think one of the people need to understand how pure the Buccaneers offense ran like everything was perfect last year, but everything was perfect for Baker Mayfield last year to end up where he did in scoring. Everything was perfect for Bucky Irving last year. When Chris Godwin was available, everything was perfect for Chris Godwin. It's
And
very,
then
very,
Jalen McMillan, Kate Otten, like
yeah.
anybody just stepped up and was blistering last year.
And I see so much concern about the Lions, about losing their, why am I blanking on his name, Dave? It's
Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson. Yes, there's so much
Yep.
concern around the Lions offense about losing Ben Johnson, and it seems like I'm not seeing nearly as much about losing Liam Cohen. And Ben Johnson had a lot of time to establish everything there. Liam Cohen was kind of like in and out, and right after David Canales was kind of in and out, and so you're kind of transitioning things. Even if Josh Griswold had been internal, it's still a transition off of a transition. So to me, I think that if you're looking at a three-headed backfield and potential just for the offense to peel back a little bit, I just don't see how Bucky Irving supports this valuation.
Yeah, and I didn't want to get into it too much, but I did write about that a little bit in my running back article that I published a couple weeks ago. That there is just expected. I'm sorry, I got something in my throat. There is just expected overall regression from everybody in this offense. So I'm completely with you on everything that you said there. And I just looked it up. I kind of forgot about the injury. A lot gets lost in the season, and he got hurt in practice leading up to week 6. And that was the first game that Bucky Irving started. And he saw the most touches in that week 6 game than he did in any other game leading up to it. And even from there, we saw as the season progressed, Rachaad White started getting more involved later on in the season. And like I said, still averaging almost 14 touches per game. That doesn't leave a ton for Bucky Irving to run away with this workhorse role that I think people are hoping that he'll get this year. Anything else on Bucky Irving?
Just to have a player valued as running back 7 but there's still a lot of very talented backs. Yeah, being in a committee is not going to be the best thing for that.
All right, let's talk some wide receivers.
I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin
Jeff
from Washington. Yeah, so Terry McLaurin from Washington. Again, I talked about how pure the Buccaneers offense ran last year. Terry McLaurin ran pretty pure on touchdown luck last year. And so that's part of it. I think the other concern there is this contract situation. And we have just seen, you remember last year, Brandon Ayuk holding out and coming in and then being injured. And then it seems more often than not, these players that are dealing with these contract situations that miss time in camp, miss time in the preseason, it feels like it never works out well for them. And so you've got that going on. You've got the touchdown luck that happened with him last year. You've got he's going to be 30 and he's sitting above multiple players that I think have the potential to jump him in value. I mean, if George Pickens takes off in Dallas, he's 6 years younger than Terry McLaurin there. So that's an easy argument. You got Chris Olave if he puts together a healthy season, Ricky Pearsall, all these young players right behind him, ready to jump up in value. And I think Terry McLaurin is probably, I mean, obviously he's older than he's ever been, but I think he's probably valued about higher than he's ever been too at this point. And so some of that's getting to be with Jaden Daniels, and some of it too, if Deebo Samuel's got anything left, that's a lot more competition for targets than what they had last year. So that's part of it. And maybe that is just a rising ship that rises Jaden Daniels passing numbers up and Terry McLaurin rides along with it. I just think there's a lot involved in to me, the biggest concern is at his age with that contract situation. If he does miss parts of training camp, parts of the preseason, that I think is a significant question.
Yeah, and Jeff, I looked it up while you were talking about it because I wanted to see the last time he was valued this highly was leading into the 2022 season. So I mean, now like it's just not something when I see a player value spike going into the age 30 year, that's just not something that I can get behind at all. I mean, like there was a point in time looking at his overall history where he was valued as the wide receiver 7. And of course I'm talking back like 2020. This was a long, long time ago. But very good player, but I fear that now that he finally has a quarterback, it might just be a little bit too little, too late, and he might be productive over the next year or so. But where he's being valued right now, definitely a guy that I'm trying to move off of. And anytime a receiver gets to age 29 or gets to age 30, starts getting up there, and I see value growing, and I also see them being valued inside the top 30 receivers, that's just like an auto sell for me. It doesn't get much easier than that. So I think we're going to agree with each other a lot on this show. I don't think there's going to be too much pushback from either
Weird.
of us, unless,
That never happened.
yeah, unless Jeff, maybe you'll push back on this one. My sell, my wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And right now he's being valued as the wide receiver 7, going 16th overall. So you figure in super flex leagues, if you want Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're paying for him with an early second round pick, and a very good player. But we talked about the regression a little bit, expected with the brain drain in Detroit. And while that definitely plays a little bit of a factor, for me, it's that last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown had the lowest target share since his rookie season, and he was able to offset that by having a career best touchdown rate. But I just don't know if we're going to see the offense revolve around him like we have in years past. One, Ben Johnson has always been that guy, whether it was Jarvis Landry or Danny Amendola in the Miami days, or whether it was Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit. He has always revolved his offense around the slot receiver. And now with the emergence of Sam LaPorta, with Jameson Williams, with Jahmyr Gibbs, there are a lot more mouths to feed in this offense. So last year, if you look at the underlying peripheral metrics for Amon-Ra St. Brown, it tells you that he's a very, very good wide receiver 2. But right now, he's being valued as a very good wide receiver 1. So again, this doesn't come down to us disliking players or anything like that. It 100% comes down to value. But when I see guys like Drake London, Drake May, Nico Collins, guys that are valued behind Amon-Ra St. Brown that I think still have a lot of room to grow, I'd more than happy to tear down off of my Amon-Ra St. Brown shares where I can.
Yeah, and I
Marvin
remember.
Harrison Jr. Yeah.
So we do the Friday injury / matchup show, and last year midseason
Yep.
we were talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown because it was after week 9. So week 9, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see, 5 of his first 8
He had
games
like
he was
8 touchdowns, I
under
want to say. He was
60
averaging like
receiving yards, but he was getting a touchdown every single week. And we talked about it on that episode about how there should be exercising some caution because this touchdown luck, like every single week there's a touchdown, but that's saving you because had there not been that touchdown, there would be significant panic on the point totals that you would have been getting off on Amon-Ra St. Brown, where he, relative to him being drafted as a top 6-ish player last year, coming in. And then right after we recorded that episode, he went for 11 receptions, 161 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars. And it was just like, okay, well,
good thing no one listens to
yep,
us.
yeah, no, yes, we don't know what we're talking about, obviously, but when you look at last season over the course of the year, he had a big blow up
But I want
against
to say, what did he
Buffalo
do the week
too.
after that, Jeff?
6 catches,
161
62
yards and
yards,
2 touchdowns.
and he did not score a touchdown for the first time in 2 months, basically. But
Right.
but that's I think you're exactly right there on just the volume is not at the same place that it was a couple seasons previously. And the other part of that too, the emergence of Jameson Williams, and if you watch the Lions last year, things that Amon-Ra St. Brown would have exclusively been doing in the past, Jameson Williams started to do some of those things too. Some of the areas where they got the ball in his hands, Jameson Williams was in Amon-Ra St. Brown type of areas. And Jameson Williams is a little bit more explosive than Amon-Ra St. Brown. It really doesn't take a lot of pulling off the target share of Amon-Ra St. Brown and putting a little bit more target share on Jameson
Mhm.
Williams, that if any of that efficiency carries through with that Jameson Williams, he will be outscoring Amon-Ra St. Brown a lot easier than maybe we realize and understand. And so that's big. And I like this call out. I think that this is a good one to put in here. And you're exactly the idea that,
You get a lot of hate for the guys they're talking about today, Jeff. I'm telling people to sell Josh Allen and Bucky Irving and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it just comes down to value. Like, you can
but
get
if you're,
multiple first round picks in return for these guys.
well, right. And if you're pivoting off Josh Allen to Jaden Daniels and Amon-Ra St. Brown to Marvin Harrison Jr., plus you're getting maybe something on top of that, that's how you play Dynasty. That is, and I've started to notice, because you'll get these trade questions where it will basically be, would you rather have Amon-Ra St. Brown or Drake London and a first? And it's like, well, to me, I feel like I should always just take the first. Like, if you're talking about similar tier players, just keep giving me the first, and
Mhm.
basically you're dealing with the same player that you had before. You got multiple firsts on top of that. It seems like a no-brainer on some levels. Like, if you Amon-Ra St. Brown for Lad McConkey, how many firsts on top of that? Like, you could easily see Lad McConkey outscoring Amon-Ra St. Brown at a younger age.
Mhm.
Plus, you got first on top of it. That's just how you play Dynasty.
Yeah, and I have Lad McConkey ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown in my redraft rankings for this year, which is a surprise to many people, but that's how I've got it. I'm bet on the young emerging player rather than the guy who's starting to show some red flags. You also talk about Jameson Williams getting like similar usage on some of the routes and the plays that we used to see drawn up for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they're just such different types of players. Where Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to catch a little wheel route and then break a tackle and drag a defender for 2 yards. Jameson Williams is shot out of a cannon on that play and has taken it 60 yards to the house without a defender getting a hand on him. So just two very different types of players here. But anyway, Jeff, you've got another wide receiver. So let's stick with the theme here.
I do have another wide receiver. I have Josh Downs at wide receiver 36. And Josh Downs, he's young and he finished wide receiver 36 last year. I think that when I see Josh Downs, there's two areas of concern for me. One is Michael Pittman was playing very, very hurt last year. And we definitely know that now. We've seen teammates have come out and said basically he was hobbling around the facility and then he would just go on Sunday. And it was a major motivating point for the entire team, seeing what he was going
Hmm.
through. But okay, he'll be healthy. And then the addition of Tyler Warren too. And so you're adding Tyler Warren, and these both are players who will operate in a similar area where Josh Downs really operated last year. And so I guess maybe I'm really genuinely curious what the ceiling is on Josh Downs. And to me, he's one of these players that the excitement and everything around him, because I mean, wide receiver 36 last year, that was pretty good, I think, for Josh
Hmm.
Downs. And I think that realistically, if you have Josh Downs and you can lock in wide receiver 36 right now, you should do that. But that's where the value can really take a step back, because if Tyler Warren is what some reports are saying that he has been in practice, I mean, there's a chance where we're all just talking about Tyler Warren this year. And if Michael Pittman comes back healthy and looks like Michael Pittman did a couple seasons ago, Josh Downs is really in a position to be forgotten about. I think forgotten about is probably an aggressive term. I think he's very, very good, but this value, and I would even say maybe intrinsically from what I've seen, he's valued more, even more than wide receiver 36.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of hype for Josh Downs, and I'm torn on this one because, like, I do see a world where Daniel Jones is the starter this year, and we've seen Daniel Jones. He doesn't really have a willingness to push the ball down the field all that much. I mean, he's going to take the short little layup throws, and a lot of those will go to Josh Downs. So I see a world where Josh Downs could have a very productive and good 2025. But then I also see another world where all the things you mentioned, Josh or Tyler Warren coming in and just being a Brock Bowers type of player that the offense runs through him, and he's getting all of those short targets that were afforded to Josh Downs. And at that point, then the floor falls out from under Josh Downs, and by the end of the season, we're looking at him as the consensus wide receiver 65. I mean, there's a huge, vast range of outcomes here, but I think when you're looking at that range of outcomes, the ceiling leaves a little bit to be desired. I don't see anything that can happen that's going to push Josh Downs into being a top 15 receiver, but I do see a world where he can fall way outside of the top 50 or the top 60. So I see more risk than reward here. And I think that makes for a decent sell. But that being said, in redraft or in best ball leagues this year, I'm still willing to take a chance just in case I'm wrong, but I don't think he's ever going to crack into that, top 15, the top 20, what we really want to see from a dynasty receiver. Really, it just comes down to the guys that primarily play out of the slot. And this goes back to a lot of the conversation we had last week about Jaden Reed. We have seen these slot players occasionally will have a year where it's just mind-blowing production and we say like, whoa, where did that come from? And then we never see it again. Now you think, Cole Beasley, he had like 2 or 3 years in Buffalo where he did that, or Hunter Renfrow had a season with the Raiders where he was just the slot receiver gobbling up all the volume, and he ended up finishing as a top 12 wide receiver that year. But we see those guys just have trapdoor floors where it could just fall out from under them. They might not even be on a team a couple of years from now. And I think that's the worry with Josh Downs, is that there's a very dangerous floor.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes, especially in the offseason, we get a little bit lost in the he played 14 games, had 803 yards. I mean, he's basically a 1,000-yard receiver, but he didn't give you bottomed out floor games. It was a lot of like 62 yards here, 72 yards here, and so along with that, it
Volume.
wasn't the 182-yard game, or like Jamar Chase. Like I just took Jamar Chase in the Scott Fishbowl, and like I was looking back and it was like, oh, he had 85 points this game, and I had kind of forgotten about that Ravens game where he just went nuts and he had like 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. I don't think that Josh Downs is gonna have 250 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game.
I don't think you will either. All right, let's talk about the last guy that we're going to talk about on this show. And like I said, we got one tight end we want to talk about. And, I had this guy pegged as my biggest sell last year. Was aggressively trying to move off of Sam LaPorta because what we saw were a bunch of touchdowns that really propped up the production. And what I saw was the underlying metrics, the target share, the targets per route run, the efficiency, the yards per route run, all left a lot to be desired. And then last year, we saw that dip even more. And, he did battle through some injuries last year. I don't want to completely overlook that. But last year, target share was 17%. That was 14th among tight ends. Targets per route run, that was 26th among tight ends. I mean, those are not good numbers. And he did come on a little bit stronger over the second half of the season. But again, this is just about valuation. We got Brock Bowers and we got Trey McBride up here. And then I see a massive chasm before I'm looking at any other tight end. But just the way that dynasty managers work is they get into round 4 and they see other people have tight ends and they don't have a tight end, and Sam LaPorta is sitting atop the queue. So they take him, and I just can't get there. I'd prefer Tyler Warren. I'd prefer Colston Loveland. I have him in the same tier as TJ Hawkinson. And with TJ Hawkinson being valued 4 rounds behind Sam LaPorta, it's just so hard for me to pay up for a guy like Sam LaPorta, knowing that I can get these productive veterans much later in my draft, or that I can get these rookies with, higher ceilings around the same price as I can get Sam LaPorta. It just feels like there's this dead zone this year where in dynasty drafts, like I said, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, I'm okay paying up for them. But then I'm also okay just waiting and like not taking a tight end in my startup until round 18 and walking away with Mike Gesicki and saying, I could probably get similar production from Mike Gesicki that I get from Sam LaPorta, and he might not be young and doesn't have the youth on his side, but I can just next year, get another veteran, whoever the next flavor of the week is, or the guy that pops up out of nowhere. And it's just really tough for me with where Sam LaPorta is getting valued to be able to corroborate that price.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with Sam LaPorta being valued as tight end 3 in Dynasty. And there is a pretty sizable gap in value between him and Trey McBride, Brock Bowers. But I think you're exactly right on the point of getting into a startup and you get like round 3, round 4, round 5, like people are kind of like, well, I don't know who to take here. Sam LaPorta, he's pretty young and he's tight end 3. Sure, I'll take him here.
I've
When
already got 2 wide receivers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then if you play it out, then you get into like round 10, and meanwhile here's like Tucker Kraft and Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts like sitting in round 10 at this point, and it's like, well, maybe I would rather have both Tucker Kraft and Dalton Kincaid instead of Sam LaPorta in the 4th round at this point. So I think that I like your point on. I think that there are multiple pivots off of and the relative value, especially when you're looking at a startup, the relative value that would be expressed for Sam Laporta. I don't think they're. I'm fine with him being tight end 3. At the same time, I could see. I mean, Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland come on this year, they're going to jump him because I think
Mhm.
you're right on the point of the big volume is probably not there. And I think that another thing that will cling to him being that tight end 1 his rookie year in 2023, but tight
100%.
end tight end scoring was really down that year, and it really rebounded in a big way in 2024. And there's just when you're looking at a Brock Bowers, I kind of feel like we're just scratching the surface on Brock Bowers, and even Trey McBride on some of the games that he put together last year. The ceiling on these two guys are just so much different than Sam Laporta, and I think that it's the type of thing where like the mind meld of like, well, I mean, I can't get one of those two guys, but Sam Laporta was tight end 1 as a rookie in 2023. So I mean, I guess that gets me most of the way there, maybe. But the reality of it is what you're gaining versus a Tucker Craft to do Sam Laporta relative to Sam Laporta not even being in the ballpark of Bowers and McBride.
And so many people talk about Sam Laporta being the tight end 1 his rookie season, and that is just something that people just say without even like really looking into it or thinking about it. You talk about it, tight end scoring was obviously down that year, but if you look in PPR on a per game basis, he was actually the tight end 3. And he was within half a point of the tight end 6. And if you look in half PPR scoring, he was still the overall tight end 1, but on a per game basis, he was within zero point 0.2 points of the tight end 5. So I mean, once you start like playing with the scoring settings and looking at per games, yeah, he scored a lot of touchdowns and he was healthy for 7 games. Once you start peeling back the layers a little bit, the Sam Laporta was tight end 1 as a rookie. Doesn't really tell the whole story there, but I think you're right that people hold on to that, and you do talk about it. I haven't done it this offseason, but I have done it in the past where you pay up for the young, exciting tight end, and then you're sitting there in round 10 and you're seeing other guys that you're like, gosh, this is really close to the guy I paid up for in round 4. And I think that's it. Like you said, the tight end 3 valuation, sure, I think that's fine. I've got him a few ticks lower, but like for me, I think the gap between where you've got Bowers and McBride up here, and then you've got the Tucker Craft and David Njoku down here. I think that Sam Laporta is probably closer to these guys than he is to the guys up top, but that's not how it's going in drafts. So
Well, and
that was
it's
great for
so
the audio
funny.
listeners too. I know they saw exactly what I was trying to do there.
Yes. Yeah, up here and down. Yeah, yeah, all that. I do think it's so funny though as you're seeing the season progress, and I write that Monday article and I really just dive into where all the targets went, where all that is going, and I remember the middle point of last year there was so much hand wringing complaints about how down tight end was, and it was really like the year before was the year where tight end was down, and I felt like I was just losing my mind screaming about like George Kittle was like on pace for like one of the most historic tight end seasons ever. Brock Bowers like did have one of the most historic tight end seasons ever, and Terry McBride like came on, and it was like
But
I
week
was
one,
yelling into the void. But it's interesting because yeah, I think Laporta is being buoyed by the excitement that earned excitement around Brock Bowers and Trey McBride a little bit.
yeah, and I just wrote an article on tight ends that I published yesterday and just talked about the overall flattening of the position. And there's so many factors that go into it. But Travis Kelsey, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, they aren't sitting atop the rankings just locked in as the 1, 2, and 3 like they were for, 3 or 4 years. And then you've also seen, in addition to Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, Tucker Craft, Dalton Kincaid, we've seen a lot of young, talented players come in. We've got the rookies that could make immediate impacts. Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland, Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson, Elijah Arroyo, Rondé Gatson. It's a very deep class. But then we've also got these veterans who are finding success in their second and third acts with new teams. David Njoku, Evan Ingram, Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, Zach Ertz. So I know it's kind of like a meme at this point that like every year we talk about how deep tight end is, but this is a combination of guys who are looking at as tight end 2s that are now rising in value and guys that we're looking at as the elite options now kind of falling off. So if you're not getting McBride or Bowers, it's really flat from tight end 3 and beyond, especially in Dynasty when you start looking at the ages for some of these guys. So I like Sam Laporta. he's a good football player. He's fun, but where he's going right now in like round 4 of startups, I just can't do it. I'd rather trade back and get the Tucker Craft and whatever picks I can get on top of it for Sam LaPorta. Well, Jeff, I should have done this probably about 25 minutes ago, but we have a magazine coming out, and I want to tell everybody to get that. We're going to put the link in the description. We just get so excited talking about football. I forget about doing this stuff all the time, but like put our heart and soul into this magazine. We've been working on it really hard. I know we teased it last week, but it is officially up there now. You can go to footballguys.com and order yours. Through the end of the week, we're taking in pre-order sales where we're knocking $5 off of the cost of the magazine, and we're giving you free shipping. In addition to that, you'll get a free copy of our rookie guide. You'll get a free copy of our league constitution for your leagues that you commission. So a lot of good stuff right here. It's going to cost you $20 out the door, and just a fun commemorative piece that we came out with to celebrate 25 years of football, guys. Probably would have done that a lot better if we got that in 20, 30 minutes ago. But hey, better late than never. And we know you all are listening through to the end. Jeff, any closing topics before we get out of here today?
Just thank you to everybody that has put in so much work on this magazine behind the scenes. I feel like I'm a very small part of this because I know how much has been put in across the team. And I mean, we cannot say it enough. We are the very best team in fantasy football. And to see everybody come together on projects like this, it means a lot.
Yeah, and I will say, obviously, I was a big part of putting this together, so I've been looking at it through the whole time and just like blown away by the staff that we have and the knowledge in this magazine. My wife has been an absolute saint dealing with me over the last couple of weeks, and she tweeted something out saying this has been the major talking point of our house for the last couple of months here. The layout of each page, the graphics, the articles, the edits, phone calls, brainstorming ideas. I mean, there's a lot that went into it, but this is something that I take a lot of pride in. Jeff, you've got a handful of articles in there. You should take a lot of pride in there as well. It's a really, really cool piece. And there's just like a cool factor too. Showing up to your fantasy drafts with like a magazine in your hand, like, acting like it's, I don't know, maybe magazines are cool again. Like vinyl records came back. Why can't magazines? But anyway, want to thank y'all so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another fun topic to discuss. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you then.